Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, I guess. My name is Connor Moran. I'm the director of the Wisconsin Book Festival. I couldn't be more delighted to welcome you to the second day of the 2021 Fall Celebration. We are joined by a really wonderful author and a really wonderful moderators. It is a distinct pleasure of mine to welcome back Oh My and the First Wave performance cohort. The Passing the Mic Festival, as many of you know, was always a highlight of the Wisconsin Book Festival. It is so wonderful to be working with Oh My again. Thank you to our performers and Oh My representatives for being here. And thank you to Rob Kenner, the author of The Marathon Don't Stop, for being here and for this book. Thanks, everybody.
Right.
I want to take one moment right here at the top to thank Madison Public Library, the Madison Public Library Foundation, and all of our sponsors. Their support of free cultural events for Madison, for Wisconsin, for the nation, for the world throughout this pandemic has been absolutely unwavering. Without them, I don't think we'd be here right now, but we are able to be because of all of their support and really pushing all of us to find digital spaces, find some in-person spaces to gather together and have these events. So thank you to them. I do want to say we have 4 events today. We have Rob for the Marathon Don't Stop. Following this, we have Tomasz Morin for his new poetry collection Machete, and Clemens Hurd, who actually got his MFA at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for his new book Tragically. Then we have Celeste Headley at 7 o'clock for her book Speaking of Race, which is all about how to have conversations about race. And then we have Jill Louise Busby for her book Unfollow Me. So I hope that people will stick around, watch another event today, and then we have a full day of in-person events at Madison Central Library tomorrow, Saturday, October 23rd. So looking forward to those. Please check wisconsinbookfestival.org for more. All right, that's all my housekeeping. Thanks so much. So we are joined by Rob Kenner, author of The Marathon Don't Stop. We are also joined by James Gavins, creative director for Oh My and First Wave. And we have 3 members of the touring cohort, Marjan Nadiri, Zachary Lesmeister, and Sarah Abbas. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to let James take over and walk us through the next couple of minutes, and I'm going to disappear. I'll see everyone at the end. Thanks so much, everybody.
Me too.
Cool.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Gavins, creative director of Oh My First Wave, scholarship program here at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Also joined by our First Wave touring ensemble, which is our audition group from First Wave that does a lot of our representation externally and internally. We have Marjan Nadiri from First Wave 14. We have Sarah Abbas from First Wave 14, and we have Zach Lesmeister from First Wave 13. And super happy to be here with Rob Kenner. We all got to check out the book. And before we get started, Sarah here is gonna bust a piece. We are reading the book and thinking about what our own takes was from it, and what would be a great representation of what was got from the book. And Sarah, hit us off.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Sarah Boss, and I'm excited to share this poem with you all today. After reading Rob's book, it reminded me of the way in which we write to leave a legacy of remembrance and preservation. And when we undergo the process of crafting stories and creating definitions through text, we kind of name it into a sort of permanence. So this poem that I'm about to share is about the 2 different pronunciations of my name, Sarah and Sada. Alias. During the loneliest nights, I name myself onto everything I see before the language catches up. My identification, syllabically wounding and winding 2 lineages of secrets, milking beneath its English cloak. My mother named me before I snapped within her, before the embryo partitioned itself. I do not know how to pronounce myself correctly. My name's Era fixes me in time. I float within the swoons and shackles of indifference and emphasis, of home and habitation. Language means nothing to time. Time means nothing to a wound that kills when the whiteness fills. When I truly hate myself, I give my name syllabic distance and hide between the warm timeliness of Ara. Where was my name when I needed it most? When men untranslated my body and left the corkless spine letters to defend themselves? Is this name the only thing I own? With what my parents gifted me, with this alias, I never truly leave them. Every time I begin, I end with myself. Thank you.
Wow.
All right. So we're gonna jump in with what I think should be a simple question. My question is, because a lot of people ask, like, who's Rob Kenner? I want to know what the people around you, how they would answer that question.
The people around me is, you know, there are many different circles, right? So there's the family you were born into, and there's the family that you create, the family you choose through your work and through your choices in life. But I guess I think that the people in my born family see me as someone who's carrying on the work of my father. I'm the son of a English professor who wrote about a lot of poets. And although, you know, hip hop poetry is something that I don't have to explain to you guys because you're all practitioners of poetry. You know, when I first became a hip hop journalist, I think that was a new idea for some people to adjust to. You know, hip hop as an art form wasn't always fully embraced. Certainly, you know, in '92 when Vibe launched, that was kind of a, I mean, there were people who worked with us on Vibe magazine who questioned, like people that were, you know, part of Time Inc., which is the publishing company that, you know, Quincy Jones, you know, brought the idea to, who questioned whether it made sense to do a magazine about hip hop with long articles. You know, there were just all kinds of crazy assumptions. But so I would say the people around me would say that I'm carrying on that tradition of, you know, honoring poetry and writers and art. And, you know, as the poem that Sarah just performed, you know, mentioned that, you know, leaving permanent, you know, footprints on the sands of time, if you will. You know, the idea of doing things to honor creators that maybe aren't given enough respect. And then other people, like in my professional family, I would like to think, and I've had actually some wonderful conversations during this rollout of the Marathon Don't Stop with people who I've worked with over the years. Like one, I don't know if you guys watch or follow Sway's Universe on, you know, on Sirius. So Tracy G is one of his squad there on the show, and she was an intern at Vibe when I was an editor there. And it was really nice to hear her impressions of me, because we really never had that conversation before I went to talk about the book on Sway's show. And she was emphasizing that I was very generous with my time to an intern who was just kind of boldly, you know, asking questions and asserting herself into a busy, hectic workspace. And so I definitely pride myself on having worked with many brilliant writers, some of whom were very renowned before I came on the scene, and some of whom have become more renowned after I initially worked with them. So, you know, that's a part of my legacy that I'm very proud of. Having not only written things, but edited and worked with writers. I think every writer needs an editor. It's definitely a check your ego at the door situation. You need, you know, to have an honest pair of eyes and ears to help you get out of your own head, right? Like when we're writing something, all of you are writers, so you can relate to the idea that, like, you have this energy inside you, you have an idea that you want to express, and it makes perfect sense to you, and you're putting it into either words or writing things on a page, and you want the audience or the reader to kind of share in your idea and your inspiration. And the editor is a channel. It's like that first reader that tells you, okay, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense or has questions. And so I like being an editor almost as much as I like being a writer. Actually, I've done more editing in my career than writing, if I really am honest. Like working at Vibe, especially I edited more cover stories than I wrote. And I edited, I wrote a column every month on reggae called Boom Shots. And I definitely wrote a number of articles, and, my writing is, we're here to talk about a book I wrote, but, if you want to know about me, I've been an editor as much as, or even more than, a writer in my career.
So you mentioned like expression through writing. And I was wondering, what's your mission as a writer, and which one of your publications is the best representation of that?
Well, I think that, kind of picking up from the last thing I was talking about, I like to champion great art that's not being properly recognized. That's my greatest thrill, is like, I can point to times when, we were the first, or I was the first to recognize someone in a big way and gave them a big look, and I think the ultimate expression of that is the Marathon Don't Stop, because to me, Nipsey Hussle is the most important and misunderstood figure in hip hop. I think that his contributions flew under the radar of the rap media. They flew under the radar of the hip hop industry to a large extent. And you didn't have to explain to people from his community why he was so important, but that's because he was so focused on his community and the people that helped him, when he was selling his home burned CDs in the parking lot of that strip mall. So this book, The Marathon Don't Stop, is the fulfillment of my goal to really shine a light on someone who's very, very important and who wasn't properly understood, who wasn't, really celebrated like he could have been during his career. And so I would definitely point to this book as the example of what I want to do with my time and my energy and my gifts.
Word, I love that. So speaking of the book, how did you prepare to write it, and how much research went into it?
Well, that's a great question. I have been preparing to write it my entire life, I would say. I've learned how to be a writer since I was a kid, and this book is definitely the most challenging and the most rewarding thing I've ever attempted. You're aware probably that it's a book that was not done like in collaboration with his record label, his management, his family, his estate. This is a journalistic account. So I'm being a music journalist and not doing something, that is signed off on by anyone or approved by anyone. So it's my account as a lifelong, music journalist. So I prepared to do this book by having covered important stories over the years in hip hop, and difficult stories, and learning how to make the judgments that you have to make as a music critic, as a journalist, as a practitioner in the culture of hip hop. I've been a DJ, and Karis One recently called me an MC, which was very flattering. When I went up to, he did you guys probably saw his verses the other day. If you didn't, check it out. But Karis One used to come to our parties in New York, and I was mostly DJing in those, but now and again I would pick up the mic and say a couple rhymes. So he remembered that. And when I handed him a copy of The Marathon Don't Stop, and a friend of mine was filming it on the iPhone, he's like, "This is the one and only Rob Kenner," and he's an MC, and that was very flattering. But Karis actually has made a point of saying that people who cover hip hop should actually be conversant in the art form, not just be like, sort of industry people, or, just come to it. I mean, I think anyone who can write should write and tell their truth and whatever, but to prepare to write Nipsey Hussle's biography, it was very helpful to be deeply grounded in hip hop. And you'll notice there's a lot of history in the book. It's not only about his life, it's about placing him in the context of Los Angeles history, American history, and hip hop history. So the specific research for this book was an intensive 3-year process. But as you know from checking out the book, I met Nip for the first time in 2009. I paid attention to his career throughout the whole run. And so, I have been kind of gathering that information and learning about him throughout that entire period of time. So in other way, you could say it's been a decade in the making.
I love that. So you have a long history in journalism, and what would you say is the difference about this book in comparison to the rest of your publications?
Well, I think, I've worked on other books in, under the Vibe Books banner. So, just to like rewind, I was one of the founding editors of Vibe when Quincy Jones launched the magazine in '92. I heard about it at the time. I was DJing, like I told you, on weekends, and I was working on an art magazine as my day job. I had learned about making magazines there, but it wasn't my greatest passion to write about, fine art and antiques, but that's what I was doing at that time, right? So I heard that Quincy Jones was going to do a hip hop magazine, and I started bombarding them with letters. These were actual mail letters with stamps on them in a mailbox, not emails. And those went out on a weekly basis until I got a response. And so I wrote a story on Supercat, who's a great dancehall artist from Jamaica, and also had a versus this last weekend. I had a great weekend last weekend. Anyway, Supercat story, basically, I owe my career to Supercat because that piece got me a job offer when Vibe launched the following year. And, over time, I basically, did everything you could do at the magazine, and then they started doing books. So I started working on Vibe Books, and I was at first contributing to the books as an editor, or contributing like a chapter to the Vibe history of hip hop. I wrote the Reggae dancehall chapter. Then I became the person in charge of Vibe Books. So we did a book called Hip Hop Divas. We did a book that was like kind of a survey of female MCs over the years. We did a book about Biggie called Unbelievable, where I hired Cheo Hodari Coker, who is a colleague of mine at Vibe, and he had been in a position to interview Big very early in his career and also late in his career, and that gave him, I thought, a unique vantage point to tell that story. So I worked closely with him to do the book Unbelievable, which was the first real biography of Christopher Wallace, aka the Notorious B.I.G. And that book ended up getting optioned to make the movie Notorious, if you guys saw that. So Cheo ended up co-writing the screenplay for Notorious and is now a very successful screenwriter. And he did the Luke Cage series on Netflix, and he did does a lot of stuff now with Amazon. So, really, great story to see how he progressed. I remember when we were doing his bio in the book, Unbelievable, we just spoken into existence. And it said, you know, Cheo Coker is a hip hop journalist turned Hollywood screenwriter. And sure enough, you know, he had worked on some screenplays, but the first one that became like produced and in theaters and that he was credited was The Notorious. And, you know, that became a film that opened doors for other hip hop biopics. You know, that the success of Notorious led directly to Straight Outta Compton and other films being able to be made. So anyway, you asked about how this book compares to other things. So the other books that I've done were done in that way, like working with Vibe, collaborating and putting something out under the auspices of a, you know, a respected publication. This is a book that I did on my own. You know, this is me, Rob Kenner, no company behind it, no cosign. It's just, you know, standing up on my own 2 feet and saying this is an important story. I want to tell this story. And so, you know, that comes with a great responsibility. You know, I consider myself still someone that holds up that tradition of great journalism that we did at Vibe, you know, and I was very honored to get a blurb from Quincy Jones, you know, when he blessed this project. That meant a lot to me. And, you know, it was just an honor to work in any capacity with someone like Quincy Jones, you know, at Vibe. But for him to then, you know, bless this project, I can't express, you know, how important that was to me. So anyway, that's the distinction of The Marathon Don't Stop and all the other books I've done before.
I love this taking responsibility to share the story so close to your heart, and you mentioning this is a book you did on your own, you standing on your 2 feet, and on that sharing as well, how you've almost tipped the domino for so many mediums of sharing art to begin to cultivate in the journalism space. So I really thank you for your work in that regard. But I was curious more so about what you saw in Nipsey's character that made him so timeless. What is this legacy that's being preserved when we see the symbol of Nipsey's face that you've put on the cover of his autobiography?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would point to 3 specific moments in time to answer that question. The first time I met him, which is, you know, described in detail in the book, but for people that haven't checked it out yet, you know, he came up to the office of Vibe magazine in 2009 to play his mixtape for us. And he wanted very much to be featured in our next section, which was like our artists on the verge. You know, this is where Nas got his first page in Vibe. This is where Mary J. Blige, Outkast, Biggie all got their first look. So Nip was a student of the game and he set his sights on that. And I found out later while researching the book that he had been submitting his demos and his headshots to Vibe for some time, you know, long before he got on any major, you know, radar of music. But he was just very determined. And I think, you know, as I was told, he was a little salty that we weren't getting back to him, but there was no trace of that when he came to the office. He was just a very impressive young man. And I love the music. The music was brilliant. It was hard LA street sounds, which I found very refreshing at that moment in hip hop. It was like kind of a ringtone rap moment in 2009. And I enjoyed hearing him flowing over the gin and juice beat and what he did with that track. And but after hearing him speak and the way he presented himself, it was clear that he was more than a gifted rapper. He was a, you know, very impressive young man, spoke very proudly about his neighborhood and also about his father's African heritage. And anyway, I was impressed and I took him to the side and shook his hand and said, keep doing what you're doing. We're going to give you all the support we can. And, you know, I'm going to be listening. So he got his page in Vibe. Vibe soon folded. This was 2009. This was almost the end of the Vibe print run. But Nip's digital strategy, as I've said in a lot of interviews, was better than Vibe's at the time. So he was on the way up while Vibe was, you know, ending its 17-year run. And so I just kept paying attention. And the second moment when I realized how brilliant he was was the Crenshaw tape, which recently had its 8-year anniversary. It was released in October. And that was the tape that people remember that he sold for $100 a copy. You know, it was a brilliant, audacious marketing move. It was a brilliant body of work also. People forget and they just talk about the price tag, but it's an amazing album. But he created a business strategy with his back against the wall, having walked away from a major label deal, having gone through a lot of real things in the streets, and, you know, with the pressure of the universe on his shoulder and his team believing in him, he came up with this plan at a time when people were not paying for music. My shit is worth $100. So you're gonna show up and pay that. And there were people who said he was crazy, and it started a lot of arguments, but he intended that. He had studied, he'd read a book called Contagious, which was given to him by one of his mentors. And, you know, he was an avid reader, although he did not complete high school, as you may know from the book. You know, he was building computers from parts. He's a genius. And he read about a Philadelphia cheesesteak shop in Philly that was selling $100 cheesesteaks, which was also outrageous and audacious. Got people talking and stirred up a lot of discussion. And he immediately understood, like, he could apply that to his music. And you know, the proof of his concept was that they moved $100,000 of CDs the first night. 10,000 of those dollars came from a wire transfer from Jay-Z. Jay-Z recognized the brilliance of what he was doing. And so I tapped in again. I was like, there he goes. That's Nipsey Hussle, you know? So the world kind of started paying attention at that point, but I knew he was brilliant before that. And then the final moment when I knew I had to write the book was our conversation in 2018 when he was just rolling out Victory Lap. So he came to New York to do his press run. I had the first interview of anybody in New York. It was scheduled for 9:30 in the morning, which is the earliest any rapper has scheduled anything with me ever. So that in itself was impressive. And we had a conversation that just went on for over an hour. It was so mind-blowing and just life-changing for me. Honestly, it was a conversation, not a Q&A, you know? And I knew enough about him to ask him about a lot of different things, and not just like talk about his album, but also talk about cryptocurrency and marketing and Eritrea and, you know, his weed business and, you know, just a lot of different things that he was involved in. And it was an amazing combo. And at the end, I was like, how are we going to make this into a 5-minute YouTube video, which was the purpose of the, you know, that was the assignment. So I just knew that a lot more had to be made from that conversation. And I also, you know, Nip's thoughts about independence and being an autonomous, creative person were very inspiring to me as someone who had gone from working for one magazine for 17 years, then working for a series of websites, and realizing that I was going to be on the hamster wheel of content the rest of my life, you know, if I didn't find some way to start doing things with more permanence and that were more, you know, like we were saying earlier in the conversation, that would leave some footprints on the sands of time. And, you know, journalism is journalism, content is content, and ne'er the twain shall meet, you know? So I wanted to do something important, and I thought Nipsey Hussle story needed to be told. So that's when I, you know, resolved to start writing this book for real. And, you know, here we are today talking about it.
Absolutely. And the mentioning of Nipsey's brilliance time and time over, but more specifically in the regard of being outrageous and outlandish with this capitalistic venue. But then also in the book, you mentioned different ways that he used capitalism as a form of empowerment.
Oh, yeah.
And absolutely. And I'm curious about not even just so the specific strategies, but how do you see other folks modeling this process that he's put forth and has initiated?
Oh, I can tell you for sure that Nipsey Hussle's marathon is continuing. The amount of people, it seems like, I don't know if every person that's bought a book has DM'd me on my Instagram, but I've received a lot of messages from people. They post the cover of the book and then we have a conversation. And I've had so many conversations. A lot of people that are starting clothing lines, people that are starting management companies, people that are not necessarily in music, but just inspired by his example to, F the middleman and go directly, use their talents and create their own model. And also, above all, I mean, just yesterday, someone in South Africa was, DMing me, and he started a clothing line and quit his day job, and he had read the book and he was a Nip fan already, but he was, we were talking yesterday about how Nipsey just removed all doubt from his mind. He did not entertain negative thoughts. When there were setbacks, he just overcame them. And some of these setbacks were crazy. I mean, if you read the book, the story about putting all that money into building a studio, and then one day he finds out that the guy he's been paying rent to doesn't actually control the building, and all of it is gone, and people around him are like, well, we can make that building burn down if you want, Nip. And he's like, no, we're not doing that. That's not us. We are gonna take this L and keep it moving. And by the time he put out Victory Lap, he had a much better studio and even more facilities to do video and everything. So it's such an inspiring story, and it's not made up, it's real. And I can't think of a subject. Writing a book is a marathon, I got to tell you, and doing so in a pandemic and lockdown and all the uprisings across America over the past couple of years, very intense time to be telling this story. And I definitely had the sense that it was a story that the world needed right now, the inspiration, the truth telling, speaking truth to power, all of it. But I couldn't have had a more inspiring subject in my headphones, listening to those stories, listening to those interviews, listening to those songs, and really sustained me through the process of putting this book together. So, yeah, I mean, if anybody wants a little inspiration, just listen to Nip's music, listen to his interviews, read this book. He's a one of one.
So we've talked, you've expressed like what led you to write the book. However, so who exactly is your intended audience for the book?
That's just such a good question. One of the things that I've become aware of, especially working at at Vibe and other magazines, is that when a hip hop artist, let's say, makes an album, they might have made that album for themselves or for their closest friends or their core fan base. But once you put it out, you don't control who receives that message. And sometimes it's the unintended audience that is most profoundly impacted. There's a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy. Have you guys seen that movie where somebody throws a Coke bottle out the window of a plane and it hits somebody, and starts a whole chain of events? This book, I think I wrote it for people who slept on Nip, which a lot of people did, right? So that was kind of my guiding principle, is like, have to show them why this person is important. And there's an interview with one of the big radio stations in New York. I'm not going to call them out. You can easily find it on YouTube. But a big radio personality who's also a big music industry gatekeeper and has a lot of prominent positions to make and break artist careers and all that stuff, literally sat with this artist and said, I really like the album. It's the first of your projects that I've ever really sat and listened to. And, at this point, Nip was like a dozen projects into a career that, you know, obviously Jay-Z thought it was pretty good. He spent $10,000 to buy, 100 CDs. It's just kind of embarrassing, really, like the level of complacency with some of the industry people. And, part of it, I had a conversation with the Lamert Park book fair recently. Actually, it was with a radio station in LA, KBLA. It's a great radio station. And they were asking, is part of the reason why people slept on Nipsey because there's an East Coast bias in the media because most of the magazines are New York based. I don't know if it's only that. I think it is true to some extent that, like West Coast rap and Southern hip hop and even Midwest, obviously with the exception of Kanye West, have been, not getting a lot of the same attention as New York. But I think there's something else going on with Nipsey in that he was just so under the industry radar and by design. Like he had an opportunity to deal with a major label very early, which he didn't even want to do, but he needed money for a lawyer at that particular moment. And so he had to take the deal. He finally realized that it just wasn't for him. The album wasn't coming out, the executives changed, musical chairs, and no one understood him in that building anymore. So he was able somehow, through the grace of God and good management and his own willpower, to get back all his master tapes, get back all his rights. And then he started what became the first tape was the Marathon, and the Marathon continues, and then Crenshaw, and then everything else after that. And I think by making that decision to really say F the middleman said F you, and the industry mouthpieces just kind of tuned out. And obviously in Los Angeles he was a hero, and he had fans all over the world. DJ Semtex in London brought him out for a show. He flew to Japan to do shows super early in his career, so he had fans everywhere, and he used social media in really smart ways. And he had a map. He kept track of like where all the fans were, and was very smart about his marketing and communication. But basically, like he was slept on. And so long answer to your question, but that is what I was trying to do. That was my primary goal. Is like, I want to write this book for people that A, are sleeping on hip hop, B, have preconceived notions about this idea of gangster rap. I spent a fair amount of time discussing the concept of gangster rap and what that means and how it has been used to kind of discredit and cheapen, powerful narratives and powerful poets. And then also, like people that slept on the culture overall, but Nip as kind of, to me, the ultimate fulfillment of hip hop's true purpose. That's what I think Nipsey Hussle is. I think he understood and executed the full potential of hip hop as a means, not only of entertainment and self-expression, but of self-empowerment, community uplift, and, just opening doors for everyone that he could.
Amazing. My other question was, as a posthumous book, how do proceeds work with publications like these that have to engage with like estates and foundations and the family and everything?
Yeah, well, okay, we don't have to do anything like that. It is not a collaborative work with the estate or with his management company, his record label. But so as a journalist, anyone can write about anything, and what they do with the proceeds is up to them. I made a decision early on in the process of doing the book that I wanted to donate voluntarily a percentage of any royalties from the book to his estate, and specifically also to a foundation that he set up called the Neighborhood Nip Foundation, which is specifically to encourage aspiring artists. And so that is something that I decided to do, and I communicated that to all of the appropriate spokespeople, so they understood that that was my intention. but it still was not a situation where anybody got to review the book or sign off or agree that you can say this, you have to say that. I thought it was very important to be an independent journalist and present what I consider, my honest take. And I think now that people have seen it, they can see that it's very respectful, and it's not any kind of a attempt to sensationalize on a tragic story or any of those kinds of things. The intention was very different. And in fact, the book doesn't really spend much time dealing with the tragedy of March 31st or any of that, but obviously it's a part of the story, so it's presented in context. But yeah, so that's how it works. I've voluntarily chosen to donate part of the proceeds to the estate and that foundation.
Cool. What was the most surprising reaction you got to this book?
Wow. Well, I was delighted, like I said before, that so many people were just moved by it. I've had people send me DMs that they read it while they were incarcerated. It helped them through a difficult period in their time, going through other stuff in their life. And so that was delightful to me, just to think that something I put so much care into and so much energy into actually is having a life beyond, I don't know what you'd expect anything that you write will do, but that was very, very gratifying. I was also thrilled to be invited to speak with faculty and students of Howard University to present the book, and it's now being taught at Howard, it's being taught at other universities, which, again, as I mentioned, Nip didn't finish high school, self-educated in a lot of ways, brilliant mind. So, one of my goals at that, early stage of writing was, I knew he was an avid reader, and I knew that there were lists of books that he would share with his closest friends and family. So one of my goals was to make the book worthy of inclusion on a list like that. Would Nip have wanted to read this book if it wasn't about him? And that's why, I don't know, it's nice to think of it now being taught at universities and having book clubs discuss the book. And I don't know, that it's very moving for me. Other reactions, I don't know. I think, I have heard that, directly from some of the people I interviewed, and then indirectly from other people that I, wanted to like the book, that, his inner circle seems generally pretty happy with it. And, that means a great deal to me. Surprising responses. I think there was a funny conversation that I had with Dexter Brown. For those of you who've read the book, Dexter Brown was a mentor to Nip at a very crucial point in his life. He's a photographer from Trinidad who moved to the neighborhood with his family and took Nip in and some of the other young men that he was collaborating with at a very early stage. This was actually before he was named Nipsey Hussle. He was going by his born name, Ermias, or E or Ermi. So they took him in, and he got access to studio equipment and made his first mixtapes there. And he also learned a lot about all of the things that he would apply in his career about intellectual property and, telling stories on video and shooting and editing video and using social media. Dexter's a brilliant person. And anyway, I've had some great conversations with Dexter, some of which I can share and some I probably shouldn't, but just about the reaction to the book among folks that he's still in touch with, both in Trinidad and elsewhere. But put it this way, there's some very heavy people from from the life of, from the street life who have read the book and really appreciate that I highlighted Dexter's contribution because, you know, as a Caribbean man living in America, there's a lot of pride that goes with that. And, you know, that he had such an impact on Nip's early development. And no one's ever actually, you know, highlighted Dexter's contribution, which is one of the things I'm proud of in the book, that I was able to kind of bring a person completely out of obscurity, really. You know, he's been left out of the narrative and played such an important role. I mean, he took Nip up to his first major label meeting because Nip wanted to sign a record deal. Like he wanted to be a rap star since he was a little kid. So Dexter was like, are you sure? You know, those record labels, they're not really being good to new artists. You know, it might not be the thing you think it's going to be, but Nip was determined he wanted to do it. So they went up to Interscope Records, and, you know, it's in the book, but basically after playing the demo, the guy behind the desk said, well, you know, the music's a little rough, but you got a good look. Maybe if you worked on your choreography and got in the studio and got a little lean muscle mass, you could like be kind of a teen heartthrob or something. And, you know, Nip just stood up. He's like, Dexter, this meeting is over. Let's get out of here, you know? And that was kind of the birth of the F the Middleman thing, you know? It was something that, you know, Nip had to see firsthand. And so anyway, Dexter played a huge role. It's important that his story is told. The fact that he was providing a kind of haven for young men to escape from just day-to-day survival and create and empower themselves through their creativity and learn the craft and also the business. And, you know, it was like a creative hip-hop boot camp, really, that he was running just for love, no other reason. He didn't manage these guys. He wasn't making money off them. His wife was making food for them. And, you know, it was a different thing. You know, his motivation is purely from the heart. So the fact that he got his flowers in this book, let's just say it made some people in the Caribbean, you know, gangster world very proud also. And you know, that pleased me to know that, you know, the Don is happy, you know, so.
On the subject of surprising reactions, how did you feel about all the quoted responses from all the iconic people that's included on the cover and the preface, like Questlove, Quincy, and those people?
Humbling is the best thing I can describe. I mean, it's a really weird thing when you do a book, you know, part of what you have to do is try to get blurbs for the book, right? The publisher would like prominent people to co-sign you, and it helps them to market the book. So it's not something I would do by my normal personality or temperament. I'm not someone that like races up and says, read my thing, tell me how good it is, you know, but that's kind of what you're forced to do, right, when you put a book out. So I tried to do this in as respectful a way as possible. And, you know, so I sent early copies of the book to writers I had admired. A lot of the blurbs come from people I've edited at Bot. You know, Greg Tate was one of the, you know, leading lights of hip hop journalism. You know, he blessed me with a beautiful blurb. And by the way, some of the blurbs were not blurbs. They were like long, you know, things that got cut down. So I cherish every word that Greg Tate wrote about this book. And Joan Morgan, you know, now Professor Joan Morgan, you know, bless me, and many others. You see them all there, you know, but every person that's there is someone I deeply respect. And so it was very moving and very powerful to have those exchanges with people, and something that I was a little, like I said, a little reluctant to do at first. And it's just not my temperament to do that. But I have to say the Quincy Jones one, when that email arrived that he was, you know, agreeing to do any blurb, I was like, oh my God. But I didn't know what he was going to write. And then, you know, about a week later, I was actually coming out of a doctor's appointment, and I checked my phone as I was walking through the lobby, and and there's an email from Quincy, and I started to read. I read the first line, and I was in the street of New York, and I just had to sit down on the, on the step of the doctor building. Like I just said, hold on, I can't wait to read this, so I have to read it right now, but I can't actually stand up and read it. Like it was a lot. So yeah, and for him to say what he said, I don't have to. I can definitely scratch something off my bucket list. I don't really have a bucket list, but it's one of those things that you just never forget. So definitely very moving experience.
Word. So my next question is, what do you feel like is the next stage of journalism? There are magazines, then blogs, then media groups, and it seems like this book is taking a step in that forward moving engine of journalism.
Are you saying for me, what's the next step, or like for journalism and music journalism in general?
For both.
Okay, well, I think for me, I'm still going to work on articles as well, but I think I'm shifting my focus primarily to writing books now and directing documentaries, because I just, like I said before, I want to do things that have permanence, have greater permanence. And, I put a lot of work into an article, and a lot of times I'm the guy that has like 20,000 words of transcripts for a 2,000 word article. And so it's like, it just makes sense to kind of adjust the ratio of effort to output a little bit. And it's definitely more challenging to weave all the thoughts together. And, there's a thing, when you have like a lot of windows open on your computer, and like, you don't know which tab to go to or which, window. And there's sometimes I'll accidentally hit something on my laptop, and it like explodes all the windows at once into like a grid of like a million rectangles on your screen, and it's overwhelming. But like when that would happen during the writing of the book, I had a lot of windows and tabs open, and one time I just like did a screenshot of it. I was like, that's what my brain feels like all the time when I'm trying to write these things, and that's why it's helpful to do it late at night, because you just can't have interruption or temptation to get sidetracked. It's very challenging, but I'm gonna stay on that path, because I think it's important there's some things that I want to write, and I need to do them in a way that has the greatest permanence. For music journalism in general, I think there's good news and bad news, right? The good news is that anyone that's serious about it can just get started. You don't need to be hired by Vibe magazine. You don't need to be assigned something by a gatekeeper. You can set up your own Medium page, your own blog, whatever it is you're trying to do. You all are writers. You have a talent. You've been recognized. You're part of a prominent national program. Don't let anybody close the door, because there's always a way around now. Especially with technology, you can put what you want out the way you want it done. You don't have to compromise. You don't have to cut corners. You just have to find a way to keep the lights on while you're doing it, right? You have to, survive. And, that can be easier said than done, but where there's a will, there's a way. And you can draw inspiration from people like Nipsey Hussle and understand the importance of owning your own creations and maintaining the integrity of them that way. And also the, whatever income can be derived from them to keep you in business and continue to, write another day. So I think that's the good news. The bad news is there's a lot of this other thing, like I mentioned earlier, called content. And I'm very discontent with content. I think there's a certain amount of BS that kind of clouds the conversation about music and pop culture, and it floods social media, it floods some of the websites. There's a lot of so-called journalism that you can literally see that like a press release has been copied and pasted and remixed slightly, and the talking points come straight from the marketing department at the label or the movie theater or the movie studio. I recently noticed a movie critic who had reviewed the new James Bond movie, and he was writing for a pretty prominent entertainment website, and then he tweeted that his interview with the cast of this film had just been canceled at the last minute because they read the review and they didn't think it was positive enough, and he was scheduled for this interview, so he'd spent time preparing questions and getting himself psyched up, and on the day of the interview he was informed, now that we see what you think of the film, we don't actually have time to fit you into the schedule, and just and then so of course I went back and read the review, and it was not a negative review to me. I mean, it was an honest review. It was like humorous, it made me laugh out loud a little bit, because James Bond movies, let's face it, they're a little silly, but so he was acknowledging that and talking about the actors played this character several times, and he seems a little bit like he realizes how ridiculous it is now. It made me actually want to see the film, but someone in the marketing department was uncomfortable, and so they canceled his interview and wasted his time that he spent preparing for these interviews. And so I was gonna big him up on Twitter, and then after I'd read the review, I went back to find the tweet, and he had deleted the tweet. So they must have called him and said, "You're blowing us up on social media. Please delete this tweet," or I don't know what they said. "You'll never work in this town again," or whatever. So that kind of stuff goes on. And, publicists exert an increasing amount of influence over access, especially if you require access to people. And so, going back to the Marathon Don't Stop, this book was not done through industry links. This book was done through my personal outreach, person by person, referral, talk to this one, they refer me to that one, and so forth. And it's possible to do that. It's just people don't do it much anymore, and even when I'm working at like editing a website or something, the young writers that come in with a lot of enthusiasm and energy, but they don't always think like about reporting and picking up the phone or sending an email or sending a DM and getting in touch and doing some primary research and getting information that doesn't exist already. So much of what passes for journalism is just like retweeting stuff and repeating things that you read on someone's timeline. And a lot of articles, the headline is basically that someone tweeted something or someone unfollowed someone, and it's like, okay, we can all see that, but maybe you could do some reporting. Maybe you could reach out and talk to somebody and add something to the conversation instead of just sort of hyping things that are happening on social media. And this gets into how websites make their money, because they need celebrities to retweet stuff to drive traffic and all that stuff. But it's kind of like I said before, it's a hamster wheel, and you can run real hard and real fast and get nowhere. And so I would say to real journalists, do some reporting, write something with a little more value, a little more permanence. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, Rob, thank you so much. I feel like even after looking at the book and doing my own research, I feel like I learned more about you, but also just more about Nipsey, more about your mission as a writer. And if you ever want to come down to Madison, First Wave has any of our events and hop on the mic, you know what I'm saying?
I would love that.
Space for you. Do you remember what your rap name was? Did somebody rap? Did they dub you?
I never used a rap name. I was Rob Kenner. DJ is Rob Kenner. I didn't have, some people call me Robbie and different things, but I wasn't in a character. I was just, but I definitely have a few lyrics in my back pocket, like Karis one said, and I saw him again at the verse the night before he went on the verses. He was hanging out at the Supercat show, and I thanked him. I was like, man, you call me an MC, and like most people don't even know I do that. And there's music journalists, don't get it twisted, that are dropping mixtapes right now, and I don't know how that works, but that's going on too. But basically, I'm like low key with it. But I said, I don't always put my resume out like that. But for you to say it brought a tear to my eye. So thank you, Glassmaster. But I accept your invitation in advance. When things open up a little bit, I'll definitely enjoy getting down with the first wave cohort. That'll be fun.
All right, headlining the next one. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Connor. I'll let you wrap it up, but thank you, Marjan, Zach, and Sarah. Thank you, Rob. It's a really, really great conversation. And
yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks to all y'all.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I mean, I just want to echo that. It's always wonderful when you put an event like this together and you have an idea and you say, these people should talk to these people, and then it works out like this. Like, I lost myself for 62 minutes, I guess. You said you were going to wrap it up, James. So I was like, oh, yeah, okay, we're at an hour. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for your poem and all of your great questions tonight. I put the link to Oh My in the chat. So if you want to learn more about First Wave, you want to see them perform, check out ohmy.wisc.edu. We're also going to be partnering with Oh My on line breaks coming up end of March, early April next year. So Rob, maybe put that on your list.
No doubt.
Oh, he's headlining. We already
figured headlining. Right. Yeah. MC Rob Kenner. And he's got a mixtape, he said. That's what I heard anyway. Anyway, thank you so much. In a half hour, we have the poets Tomasz Morin and Clemens Hurd coming up. So a lot more on tap for the rest of the night with Wisconsin Book Festival. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you so much for everyone for participating in the event. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Peace.